Hello, listeners. This is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This is the continuation of Swallow the Stars. This will be part 45, chapter 45, entitled Gifts and Grievances. Consciousness comes to Izuku in pieces, and it starts with relearning how to breathe. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, each one stronger and more sure than the last. He can feel the scrape of air down his throat, the way his lungs inflate and deflate in his chest. Sound is next, and it's mostly rhythmic beeping. It's familiar, mechanical, and steady enough to nearly lull him back to sleep, but something nags at his mind, urging him to stay awake. After that comes textures against his skin, rough fabric beneath his fingers, smoother fabric against his chest, a pinch in the crook of his left arm, and something thin and round and smooth against his forearm. Something is strung across his face, too, dipping under his nose and hooking behind his ears. He searches around, under his skin, for the reassuring weight of a mahaki, but he doesn't feel it, can't find it. The god isn't in his ribcage or his arms or pulled in his shoulders. All that's there is a tiny cold spot on Izuku's first rib, right where the contact had been carved, right where Amahaki used to drape and sprawl like a lazy cat, but it's not the god, just a memory of it. Amahaki is gone, and Izuku feels its absence like a lost limb. And then he remembers, all at once. Being kidnapped by the League of Villains, the doctors, experiments, the battle with All for One, a spray of blood amidst so much destruction, and then death. Izuku died. He knows he did. But he's breathing, and he's thinking, and he really doubts that those things would be possible if he was dead, or still dead. The only thing left for him to do is open his eyes, but he's afraid to do so. He remembers dying in the middle of that rubble field, remembers his cold body and his lack of breath and blood flow, but everything after that is darkness. What if he's back in the facility? And this has all been a dream? What if he's still in the White Room with the doctor, and this is just a sick experiment coordinated by All for One? What if they stole Amahaki and are waiting to shove something else into him, something worse? He hears a door slide open and then close, clicking quietly into place. The facility and the doctor's lab both had heavy metal doors that swung on hinges and rattled when they closed. Wherever he is, he can't be there, so maybe, just maybe. Izuku opens his eyes and finds that it's dark in the room. There's a little bit of light filtering through a small window on the wall to his left, past the slightly glowing monitors, but otherwise the overhead lights are off and nothing else is around to illuminate the space. Izuku? He turns his head slowly, blinking at the figure in the doorway until he recognizes Hizashi. A smile spreads slowly across Izuku's mouth, but when he parts his lips and draws in an inhale to speak, a cough rips roughly through him, straining his lungs and his throat. Hizashi's at his side in an instant, helping him sit up and rubbing his back until breathing becomes easier. A cup of water is pressed to Izuku's lips, and he eagerly tips his head back to drink. A little spills down his chin, but he doesn't care, because this is the first time he's had water since before Shigaraki dragged him through the warp gate in the mall, however many hours ago that was. Take it easy, Hizashi murmurs once Izuku has finished. He uses his sleeve to wipe at Izuku's chin, and then cups his cheek in his warm hand, guiding their eyes into meeting. Hey there, little listener. A warm smile splits across Hizashi's face, and his thumb strokes over Izuku's cheekbone. You gave us quite the scare. Izuku wants to say sorry, knows that he should say sorry, because he did something wrong, because it's his fault he died, his fault that Hizashi and Aizawa had to face down the prospect of holding a funeral for their son. But he can't really bring himself to. He doesn't regret his decision to push All Might away and fight All for One himself. If he was given the opportunity to go back in time, he would do it all again. So instead, he settles on a raspy, "How am I not dead?" The smile falls off of Hizashi's face. You were for a while there, he says, but Izuku knows this already. He felt it. He accepted it. Death had been a guarantee the moment he took his gloves off. He's known for a long time now that there is, or was, a limit to how much of Amahaki's power he could safely handle, how much he could push his stamina, before his body couldn't take the toll anymore. And he passed that limit several times over during the battle. He's just lucky that Amahaki chose to keep fighting long after Izuku's body stopped living. Careful not to disturb Izuku too much, Hizashi sits down on the edge of the bed and pulls Izuku into his side. Izuku goes easily, willingly, glad for the warm comfort of his dad's arms. What happened? Izuku asks after a moment. He's exhausted down to his bones, but he doesn't want to sleep so soon after waking up. His dad is here, and he wants to spend time with him. Time that he thought he would never have again. After Amahaki left, I mean. Izashi sweeps his thumb over Izuku's shoulder and tilts his head down to rest his cheek atop Izuku's head. We ran to you. All Might was weary that All for One wasn't really gone, but Shota and I couldn't stop. You were just laying there on the ground, carefully spread out on a slab of cement. It looked like you were sleeping, but you weren't breathing. His voice chokes up, and Izuku slips his arm around his dad's waist, trying to reassure him that he's here, he's alive. With a shaky inhale, Izashi continues. We both knew that CPR would be useless at that point, but Shota wanted to try. Before he even touched you, though, I don't know how to describe it, but there was this dark aura that slipped around you and sunk into your skin, and then you took a breath. A kiss is pressed to Izuku's curls. It looked a bit like Amahaki, in my opinion. Izuku swallows thick and heavy, and tears well up in his eyes. It's gone, he says. Amahaki is gone. I can't feel it anymore. There's just this cold spot on my rib, and that's it. Hands shaking, and he's just now realizing that they're devoid of his gloves and not wrapped in bandages. He latches onto Izashi's shirt. I think it saved me. I think it brought me back. That's the only thing that Izuku can think of. He'd seen firsthand the god's power with realities. Izuku never got a chance to play with that power, never wanted to, but he remembers. During the fight, Amahaki erasing and rewriting reality around them to keep All for One in its grasp. Izuku died, but he's breathing right now. Because an abused little boy cried over the mistreatment of a god, because a preteen reached out a hand and offered friendship to a being who hadn't experienced the company of mortals in millennia, because a teenager carried that power and chose to save people with it, because Izuku loved, and he was loved in return. Amahaki couldn't stay, but it could give Izuku one last gift. I'm half tempted to track down a temple and pray to it, Izashi says. With a small chuckle, clearly joking, Izuku understands the sentiment, though. There's no one left to worship Amahaki, no place remaining on earth to leave offerings and slips of prayer. But Izuku will cast up his thanks to the night sky for the rest of his life, and he can only hope that's enough to make up for the second chance he's been given. What about the villains? Izuku asks, voice quiet in the empty room. Izashi hums, though he doesn't say anything for a moment. Shota caught the warp villain, and All Might was able to take down Shigaraki with Endeavor's help. The Flame User and a few others got away, but the main ones have been sent to Tartarus. Did you get the doctor? What doctor? Izashi moves to lean away, probably to see Izuku better, but Izuku clings to him and shudders, tipping his head down to avoid his dad's gaze. There was a man that All for One called the doctor. Izuku gestures loosely to his chest. He's the one who cut open my scars. He doesn't think he can say anything else right now. Can't put into words what happened to him in that white room. And maybe he'll never be able to. There are a lot of things his dad still don't know about the facility, too. This will just be one more knife in his side that he'll take to his grave. No, kiddo, Izashi says, and his words swim in thick regret. We didn't arrest any doctors. Somehow, Izuku isn't surprised by this. With Kurogiri on their team, the doctor could have been located anywhere. Izuku had assumed underground, but with such a wide radius on Kurogiri's quirk, there's no way the doctor was nearby. He needs to be a priority, Izuku says, even as his eyes slip closed and sleep threatens to overwhelm him. He can make Nomu, if he's not caught. Okay, Izashi murmurs, rubbing soothingly over Izuku's arm. Okay, little listener. We'll let Tsukuchi know about it tomorrow, yeah? You can give your statement and a physical description, and we'll do our best to find him. The door slides open again, bathing the room in momentary light bright enough to seep through Izuku's eyelids. Then it's cut off when the door closes again. Hey, Sho, Izashi says. Izuku blinks his eyes open to find Aizawa, dressed in his casual clothes and lacking his capture weapon. Staring at him, careful of the needle in his arm, Izuku reaches out his hand and makes a grabby motion in the air. Hi, Dad. Aizawa crosses the space between the door and the bed in 2 strides, and Izuku finds himself gathered up into strong arms and pressed against a warm chest. For a long moment the two of them just breathe and hold each other, but then Aizawa leans back and cups Izuku's face with calloused and gentle hands. I am wrapping you in bubble wrap, and never letting you out of my sight again, problem child. The words are probably a joke, but Aizawa's expression is definitely not humorous. What were you thinking? A wince pulls itself across Izuku's face, but he doesn't look away from his dad. All for one had to die, and I knew All Might wouldn't and couldn't kill him. But Amahaki could. He sighs, knowing that no justification he gives will make his actions seem logical to either of his dads. It seemed worth it. Vigilantism seemed worth it, Aizawa asks, teacher voice fully in place. For a moment, Izuku's lips press together as he wonders what exactly he should say to that, but eventually he just sighs. Honestly, no. I meant that death seemed worth it. Shock flits across Aizawa's face, the moment it registers that Izuku knew he had willingly walked to his death, and he hears Sasashi's breath stutter with the same revelation, but Izuku hardens his resolve and meets Aizawa's gaze directly. A monster like that? With reach so far into the underworld and power over so many villains, Tartarus wouldn't have been enough to hold him. Aizawa doesn't say anything for a long time, just watches Izuku's face held between his hands. I am grounding you, indefinitely, he finally says, hands sliding off Izuku's face as he makes his way around the bed to sit on the opposite side from Hisashi. You get to do school stuff, and that's it. No dates with Hitoshi, no hanging out with your friends, nothing. As much as Izuku thinks that that's fair, and as much as he wants to say so, his brain catches on the word school and won't let go. He's not sure why, because of course Aizawa would let him continue to participate in school activities, since even the ones that seem fun are essential for learning how to be a hero, until the realization of Amahaki being gone comes back around to him. I'm quirkless. It comes out of him in a quiet and quick breath, like he took a punch in the stomach and can't force volume into his voice. I don't have any power anymore. Eyes swimming with fresh tears, Izuku looks between Hisashi and Aizawa. Am I going to have to drop to the Gen Ed course? He doesn't really think that his dad's or Nezu would make him do that, but he's been told for most of his life that quirkless equals useless, that the only thing he'd ever amount to was hosting Amahaki under his skin. He just needs to make sure. Aizawa and Hisashi both soften immediately, reaching out to comfort him in their own ways. It's Aizawa who speaks first, Hisashi probably holding his tongue because he's not a homeroom teacher for the hero course. Izuku, no, of course not. How many times have I told you that quirks are just tools? If you don't have a quirk, then we'll just get you other tools to make up for it. He shakes his head and presses a kiss to Izuku's hairline. You're already a hero, Izuku, with or without a quirk. All you're missing is a license, and I promise I'll get you there. Okay, problem child? A quiet, hiccuping laugh falls out of Izuku's mouth as relief rushes through him. Okay, he whispers, through a blinding smile that isn't at all dampened by his tears. At least I won't need to pick a new hero name. Hisashi laughs and pulls Izuku tighter against his side, and for the first time since waking up, Izuku feels like he can breathe properly again. The next few days pass by in a blur. None of the hospital staff are willing to let Izuku go, even though his injuries have healed and his exhaustion has mostly abated. He died, and they're not afraid to wave that fact around in his face, if it means getting him to stay in bed and rest. His dads, the traitors, agree. On the first day, Tsukuchi-san stops in with Chief Surigame. Izuku walks them both through what had happened, starting with the day at the mall and ending with a vaguely detailed fight against All for One. Izuku's ability to be possessed by Amahaki is not a documented part of his quirk, so Tsukuchi rightfully asks a lot of questions, and Izuku answers as best as he can in a way that isn't incriminating, or that reveals too many secrets. At this point, the whole truth is probably safe to go in a police report, but Izuku would rather not risk it. They scold him for using his quirk without a license or hero approval, but ultimately, since he no longer has said quirk, and took down a nuclear-level villain and was drugged at the time, they don't charge him with anything. Later that afternoon, Hitoshi comes in with his whole family in tow. Haruki perches herself in Izuku's lap and makes everyone flower crowns. Ryota gives Izuku playlists and a black branded t-shirt for one of the bands they both like. Maki-san spends most of the time just playing with Izuku's hair, and Keita-san and Asahi-san sit in chairs and keep conversation and laughter flowing into the room. For his part, Hitoshi glues himself to Izuku's side and refuses to move for anything. Izuku kisses his boyfriend's forehead and cheek and temple, and he apologizes over and over for leaving like that, for scaring him so much. No one except the heroes present during the raid know that Izuku died that day, and Izuku wants to make sure it stays that way. When Hitoshi cries silently into Izuku's shoulder after his family leaves, and Aizawa and Hisashi return, no one says anything. On the second day, Hitoshi comes back, this time with Shoto, Katsuki, Mina, Kirishima, Kaminari, and Sero trailing in behind him. The room gets loud and busy, and Izuku loves every second of it. Hitoshi and Katsuki sit like sentinels on either side of Izuku, shoulders pressed together, but that doesn't deter the others from piling in around him. Mina sits on his lap and hugs him for several minutes. Kirishima and Shoto take up positions leaning against Izuku's legs, and Kaminari and Sero fold themselves onto either end of the bed, each with one of Izuku's feet in their lap, their hands resting on his shins. It's the most whole Izuku has felt since Shigaraki slipped his hand around Izuku's throat. Hitoshi doesn't leave that night, and Izuku's happy to comfort them both by holding Hitoshi while they sleep. On the third day, Amajiki-senpai, Togata, and Hato all slip into Izuku's room bearing gifts. They don't stay very long, but Izuku's happy to see them anyway. Katsuki returns that evening with a home-cooked meal and his mother, and Izuku doesn't think he's ever tasted anything so delicious or been so happy to hear two people argue. He gets a new phone that day, too, and Hitoshi gladly adds Izuku's new number into both the Chaos Squad and the Class 1A group chats. Izuku spends the next several hours talking to and reassuring the classmates who haven't seen him yet. On the fourth day, Izuku is finally allowed to go home. Days of bed rest made coordination more difficult, and he stumbles over his feet as he crosses the threshold of the apartment. Coco and Leo are screaming at the door, immediately surrounding him while he tries to get his shoes off. Laughter falls easily from him when he eventually gives up and releases his hold on Hitoshi to sink to his knees and pet his cats. Coco squirms her way onto his shoulders, and Leo gets in his lap and stays there. Both of them are purring up a storm, punctuated by little chirps from Leo. A camera shutter sound brings Izuku's eyes up, and he finds Hisashi unabashedly taking another picture on his phone. Hitoshi is still by Izuku's side, where he had been glued ever since he got permission from Keita-san to stay for a while. Aizawa only sighs at the three of them, and pushes his way into the kitchen. Izuku is sure that there will be tea waiting for him if he gets up and follows after his dad, but right now he needs a shower and a change of clothes to get the smell of the hospital off of him. Gently, Izuku sets both cats on the floor before he eases to his feet, thankful for the hand Hitoshi quickly puts on his arm to steady him. Part of Izuku feels bad for not telling Hitoshi that he died, but for the life of him, he can't think of any good it would do either of them. Izuku is alive. He's here, he's breathing. His heart is beating in his chest. Hitoshi already knows that Izuku's a martyr, already knows that he would rather break himself a million times over than see people he cares about get hurt. Admitting to Hitoshi that Izuku took it a step further, that he overextended himself on purpose and fell quietly into death's waiting arms. No, not when Izuku himself is so eager to forget the whole thing. His death did nothing for him except confirm that there was no warm light waiting on the other side, no gentle caress of an afterlife. All that met him, as he died, was a cold void of Amahaki in an infinite sea of stars. And Hitoshi doesn't need that knowledge, not when Izuku is here in front of him, and not planning to go anywhere anytime soon. "You want a shower?" Hitoshi asks, thumb smoothing over a stray scar on Izuku's forearm. Small compared to all the rest. It's new, he thinks. Something he got at UA, probably during the battle trials. Izuku smiles, soft and happy. "You read my mind." With a snort, Hitoshi loops Izuku's arm around his shoulders and starts leading him to his bedroom. "That's what my hair is hiding. Telepathic abilities." Laughter carries Izuku through getting a change of clothes and showering. Even when it stops being audible, there's a light feeling in his chest that can only be attributed to Hitoshi's specific brand of sarcasm and how goddamn happy he makes Izuku. When he had walked to his death with his head held high, his only regret had been the last words he signed to Hitoshi, that none of them were "I love you." He can make up for it now. When he steps into his room, hair still damp and clothes sticking to his body in odd places that he didn't dry well enough, Izuku closes the door behind him. Hitoshi is sitting on the edge of the bed, thumbing through his phone. He looks up, though, when Izuku steps between his knees and reaches out to cup his cheek. It's weird, even after 4 days of getting used to it, to not have his gloves acting as a barrier between his palms and the rest of the world. But Hitoshi's cheek is soft, and Izuku thinks he'll grow to like it. "I love you," Izuku says, pushing as much sincerity and tenderness into his tone as he possibly can. "Shinso Hitoshi, I love you so much." A blush spreads like spilled wine across Hitoshi's cheekbones, but he has never been one to back away from Izuku's affections, nor to take them lying down. He reaches up with slow, sure hands and pushes his fingers into Izuku's damp curls, framing his face with his forearms. "I love you too," he says, like it's a promise, like it's the best thing that could have ever happened to him. Izuku leans down, eyes fluttering to half-lidded as he bumps his nose gently into Hitoshi's. Not even a week ago he'd been willing to give this up. He doesn't regret it. But he's so glad that death is no longer his reality, that he has a lifetime of Hitoshi's kisses to look forward to. With a huff of warm air against Izuku's lips, Hitoshi presses up to initiate the kiss, and Izuku's eyes finally close. He sinks into the softness of Hitoshi's mouth, the careful way he tilts his head to get a better angle, the confident way he flicks his tongue over Izuku's lower lip as if asking politely for entrance, as if Izuku would ever deny him. They stay like that for a while, just kissing and holding each other until Izuku's back starts to ache and his calves protest against so much standing after so long in bed. But Hitoshi is a quick thinker, as much as he's a lazy kisser, and he shifts his hands down from Izuku's hair over his shoulders and down his back to settle at his waist. Here, come here, he murmurs, and the combination of his deep voice and the warmth of his hands has Izuku melting as he moves where Hitoshi wants him. Izuku ends up on Hitoshi's lap, hands on his shoulders, and then Hitoshi tips backward till he's lying on the bed and Izuku is flush against him. If I didn't know better, Izuku whispers, pressing a kiss to the corner of Hitoshi's mouth, and then another to his jaw. I would say you missed me. Good thing you know better, Hitoshi replies, voice breathy and low. His hands slide up from Izuku's hips to his back, tracing his spine in a way that makes Izuku shiver. Gonna be hard to miss you when I'm never fucking leaving your damn side again. A huff of laughter drops from Izuku's lips, and he leans back up to catch Hitoshi in another kiss. But Hitoshi pulls away a second later, brows furrowing in mock seriousness. You think I'm joking? Do I look like I'm joking? You look like a dork, Izuku says, so serious that he breaks out into giggles. Hitoshi grins before quickly schooling his features. Oh, that's it. Without warning, his fingers go from soothing over Izuku's back to curled into his sides as he relentlessly tickles him. Izuku howls with laughter, breath wheezing out of him as he tries to squirm away and realizes he can't, that Hitoshi has trapped him on his chest and isn't going to let him go. Izuku screeches, tears pouring down his face as he pushes on Hitoshi's shoulder and clings to one of his wrists, begging for mercy without words because he can't get enough air into his lungs to plead. A knock at the door saves him. Hitoshi's hands falling away just as Aizawa's voice comes through from the hallway. Izuku, you better be packing. Without oxygen in his brain, and with laughter still bubbling out of him, it takes a moment for the words to register in Izuku's mind. Packing for what? He asks between big gulps of air. Summer camp is in 3 days, Aizawa responds, and even with the door between them, he sounds amused. You're not getting out of it just because Amahaki is gone. I've already written up a new lesson plan for you, so get your ass packed. Izuku groans, not wanting to get off of Hitoshi and disturb the peace that's fallen over them, but he pushes himself up onto his hands and knees and fixes his eyes regretfully down at his boyfriend. Yeah, okay. I guess I'll pack for the hell trip. Aizawa grunts. Good. Lunch is in an hour. His retreating footsteps follow not long after, and Izuku sighs, his eyes slipping closed. Honestly, he'd forgotten about the summer camp. It was the whole reason for the mall trip, but after being with the League of Villains for a quarter of a day, and then spending 4 days in the hospital, the promise of a class excursion into nature, as much as it's definitely going to be more similar to a boot camp than a summer retreat, had seemed like a far too hazy of a dream to be the reality that's waiting for him. He gets to see the rest of the class again soon, gets to be enveloped in another of Mina's hugs and ribbed by Kaminari's bad jokes and calmed in the presence of Katsuki's prickly form of caring and Shoto's developing sense of self. He gets to live and enjoy doing so. Warm hands settling on Izuku's hips draw him back to the present, and he smiles brightly down at Hitoshi, who is looking up at him like he's the sun itself. What is it? Izuku asks. Quiet in the stillness of the room. Hitoshi just shakes his head and smiles back at him. I love you, Aizawa Izuku, he says, and it sounds like forever. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 45 of Swallow the Stars. Chapter 46 will be next, which is the last and final chapter, and it is an epilogue for this fic. I hope you all have enjoyed it so far. I know everybody kind of struggled with the last chapter. Those of you who've read the fic before, you were probably fine because you knew what happened. But those of you who didn't might have been pretty concerned that it was going to be a bad ending. I promise that I will always include a major character death somewhere as a content warning and listed as a spoiler in the description somewhere. So those who don't want spoilers don't have to see it, but those who do want to know if there's a major character death for a fic will know, because I think one of the biggest things that the fanfic community struggles with is untagged major character deaths. And I don't want to be the Podfic version of that for people who have never read the fic themselves. I don't want to just hit you with a major character death and not give you any warning or possibility for a warning ever. So I hope that works for you all. I really appreciate everybody's amazing support on this channel. You all have been incredible so far. I'm very excited to read the epilogue of this fic. The author did such an amazing job with this. If you haven't checked out their AO3 or been over there to their actual page and given kudos yet, I definitely recommend if you've made it this far and you like the fic. And that goes for any of the other authors and fics on this channel as well. If they're ones that you've liked and you have an opportunity to slide over to AO3 and leave kudos, then I highly recommend you do so because any additional author support is always appreciated, I'm sure. With that, I'm starting to realize I'm beginning to ramble a bit, so I'll wrap this up. Chapter 46 is up next, and thank you all so much for listening.